sit down to pray, and within about 90 seconds your mind bolts. The grocery list, yesterday's argument, the phone you swore you would leave alone, and then the quiet verdict lands. Something must be wrong with my faith. I want to show you why that verdict is a lie. There is a real experiment published in the journal Science in the year 2014 where people left alone in a bare room with nothing but their own thoughts found it so hard to sit with that many chose to give themselves a painful electric shock rather than nothing at all. 67% of the men did it and about a quarter of the women. Your brain would rather be shocked than sit still. That is not weak faith. That is wiring. And here is my promise to you. Neuroscience can now reveal the mechanism behind that resistance, and the ancient church named it symptom for symptom, more than 1,000 years before the first brain scan. After hundreds of hours living in both of those worlds, the lab and the desert, I have come to picture the praying mind like a river. The water has a current, and the current only ever runs one way, downstream, away from stillness, away from God. Prayer is the moment you turn to face upstream. Stop paddling and the water takes you. By the end of this, you will know the one shift your brain has been waiting for, and it is not the one you would guess. A gentle note first, this is not medical advice, and if you are struggling deeply, please talk to a doctor, a pastor, or a counselor. But before any of this can help you, I have to show you why the thing you have been trying has quietly been failing you. Here is what almost everyone tells you to do. Try harder, find more willpower, grit your way through it. Maybe do a dopamine detox and reset the whole system. Dopamine, by the way, is simply the brain's wanting and reward chemical, the thing that makes you crave the next new hit. And that advice sounds right, but it treats the symptom and never touches the root. Because the problem is not that you are lazy in prayer. The problem is the current itself. That current has a name. Scientists call it the default mode network. In plain terms, that is your brain's autopilot, the channel it runs the moment your attention drifts off a task. And here is what should stop you cold. Researchers at Harvard, writing again in the journal Science, this time in the year 2010, tracked people through ordinary life and found their minds wandering almost half of every waking hour. 47% of the time, you are not where your body is. Now, take that wandering mind and ask it to hold still before God. Of course it bolts. There is more. Every time you catch the drift and drag yourself back, a small alarm fires deep in the brain, in the anterior cingulate cortex, set behind and below the center of your forehead, the part that flags the conflict. Then the prefrontal cortex, right behind the forehead, supplies the effort to bring you back. Noticing the drift is not the failure, noticing is the paddle hitting the water, and underneath it all runs a second current, the pull of the rapids. This is a different system, the brain's dopamine-driven reward circuitry, which rewards you for chasing anything new. So a silent, low-stimulus act like prayer reads to that circuitry as nothing is happening here, and it goes hunting for your phone. The wandering and the craving are two currents feeding the same river. Do you see it? The resistance you feel is not a verdict on your love for God. It is the downstream pull of a mind built to wander. If this is already landing, take 1 second to subscribe and tell me in the comments the one thing that pulls you out of prayer most, because naming it is where the fight begins. So if willpower is not the answer, what is? Here is where everything turns. Science is brilliant at one thing and helpless at another. It can map this current in stunning detail. It can measure the drift, watch the autopilot light up, chart the pull toward the new. What it cannot do is tell you what to hold your attention on or why it matters, or who is waiting for you on the far bank. The scanner can diagnose the drift. It was the desert that wrote the remedy. Long before anyone could measure a brain, Scripture described this exact pull. In the letter to the Romans chapter 8, Paul writes that the mindset on the flesh is hostile to God, that it does not submit, that on its own it cannot. Read that slowly. He is not describing a bad mood. He is describing a standing orientation, a mind whose default direction runs against God. That is the current, named 2,000 years early, what the scientists chart as the autopilot, Paul calls the mind of the flesh. Two languages for one and the same pull. Then look at the garden in Matthew chapter 26. On the hardest night of his life, Jesus asks his closest friends to stay awake and pray, and they cannot even manage that. He tells them the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That gap between the part of you that truly wants to pray and the part that keeps collapsing into distraction is the very gap the brain shows us between intention and the machinery meant to hold your focus. Name it clinically or name it spiritually, it is the same fracture. Go back further to Genesis chapter 4, where God warns that sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. Something crouched at the threshold, ready to spring the instant you turn inward. That is the pull toward the new, waiting at the doorway of every silent moment. And in Luke chapter 10, Martha is called distracted, pulled in many directions by her serving, while Mary simply sits at the Lord's feet. The oldest picture we have of a wandering mind. And the ancient church did not just notice this pull, they fought it. A monk named Evagrius, writing in the 4th century in the Egyptian desert, described a specific attack he called the noonday demon, a name drawn from Psalm 91, the heaviest of them all, a restlessness that struck at a predictable hour, between roughly the 4th and the 8th hour of the day, and drove the monk to keep glancing out his window, desperate to be anywhere but in prayer. 15 centuries before we had a term for the brain's aversion to stillness, he had already charted its timetable. What that monk endured, the scanner now measures. So if this pull is that old and that predictable, how did they beat it? They left us something I want to hand you as 5 strokes, 5 ways to row upstream. The first stroke is to name the current. When your mind bolts, you stop reading it as proof you are a fraud and start reading it as the autopilot doing exactly what it was built to do. Saint Teresa of Avila, in the 16th century, told her sisters not to imagine that all is lost when the thoughts wander a little. You cannot fight a current you believe is your fault. The second stroke is to expect the noonday. The monk knew the attack came on schedule, so it stopped ambushing him. You do the same by praying at a fixed time and a fixed place, so the resistance meets a wall instead of a decision. The third stroke is to anchor on one word. A monk named John Cassian, writing in the 4th and 5th centuries, watched his own mind wander even mid-prayer, jumping from thought to thought as if it were drunk. And the remedy the desert elders handed him through a teacher named Abba Isaac was to collapse the whole scattered mind onto one short repeated line. "O God, come to my assistance. O Lord, make haste to help me." That is what quiets the autopilot. Not 100 good intentions, but a single anchor the mind can return to. The fourth stroke is to return without contempt. Every time you catch the drift and come back, that is the paddle in the water, that is the rep. The wandering was never the failure. Not returning is. The fifth stroke is to stay past the bolt. The urge to quit peaks in the first minute or two, and if you ride it out, it fades, because the pull toward novelty starves when you stop feeding it. Jesus said, watch and pray, and to watch means to stay awake through exactly that window. The order matters. Skip the first stroke and every wandering becomes shame, and you quit before technique can ever save you. If a stroke like this is landing, subscribe so the next one finds you, because knowing the strokes is not the same as rowing. So, what does this look like in a real week? Choose one fixed time, ideally in the morning, before your hand ever finds your phone, and one fixed place. Put the phone in another room so the thing crouching at the door is simply not with you. Commit to a single rule. Stay for the first 90 seconds no matter how strong the pull, because that is the window where the resistance is loudest and where it breaks. Pick one short prayer line and use only that one. All week, no switching. And when your mind wanders, and it will, do not scold yourself. Note it, return, and quietly count the return. Some days you will return 30 times in 5 minutes. That is not a wasted prayer. That is 30 repetitions of a muscle almost no one alive is training. Once this week, sit in 5 full minutes of silence with no input at all, just to teach your nervous system that stillness is not an emergency. None of this is willpower. It is training. You are not forcing the river to stop. You are becoming a stronger swimmer. And when you understand what that swim really is, it changes everything. Sit with this for a moment. Scripture calls it the mind of the flesh, hostile to God, unable on its own to submit. Neuroscience calls it the autopilot, the current that pulls you downstream nearly half of your waking life. These are not two different problems. They are one event told in 2 languages, which means the resistance you have been calling a spiritual failure is the exact battlefield the saints trained on for centuries. You were never fighting alone, and you were never fighting something new. So hear this. You are not broken and you are not faithless. You are a normal person with a wandering mind, trying to hold still before God, which is one of the hardest and oldest things a human being can do. The resistance is not the end of your prayer life. It is the beginning of your training. If this reached you, type the word renewed in the comments so I know it landed, and share it with one person who has been blaming themselves for a wandering mind. There is more of this waiting for you here. Turn and face the current, because your wandering mind was never the proof you are far from God. It is only the water, and every stroke against it is already prayer.